Coming up on today's episode of PSN, Wheelchair Motocross, better known as WCMX, is a rapidly growing sport. They just held their World Championships last month. Victor Nelson from the WCMX Federation is here to tell you and me all about it.
Welcome to Parasport Nation with Alex Smyth and Nathan Clement.
Welcome in to Parasport Nation. I'm Alex Smyth. As always, I am joined by co-host Nathan Clement. Nathan, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing great, Alex. Had great holidays, and I'm really looking forward to having the show run in 2025. How's the holidays for you, Alex?
You know, it was busy. It was short. That's usually a sign that it was a good time. I got new hearing aids, so some viewers on YouTube may notice I no longer have the headphones because I'm Bluetooth connected to the hearing aids themselves. But that is not what we are here to discuss today. We are chatting about WCMX, Wheelchair Motocross. It's an extreme sport where athletes perform tricks and stunts in skate parks using their wheelchair. The WCMX moniker is a mashup of wheelchair and BMX. The term was coined by Aaron Fotheringham, who is widely considered the founder of the sport. He is also better known as Wheels. Riders use purpose-built wheelchairs called WCMX chairs to perform various tricks and stunts. And unlike standard daily wheelchairs, WCMX chairs have a reinforced frame, grind bars, carbon fiber push wheels, skateboard or rollerblade wheels, suspension casters, and a seatbelt, all to make sure they are safe. As I mentioned, the 2024 championships were held in Birmingham, Alabama in December. And joining us to chat now more about this adaptive sport is Victor Nelson. He is the chief of competition with the World WCMX Federation. Victor, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
So for someone who doesn't know, how would you describe WCMX?
So WCMX is basically the use of a wheelchair in the skate park. Most people are kind of familiar nowadays with the mainstream of wheels being a nitro circus and seeing more of like the souped up wheelchairs sending it through the air. But really, anyone that wants to kind of just come roll around, obviously wheel devices in a skate park. That's how it's designed. That's how it's intended to be used. And it's becoming more and more common use to see wheelchairs out there of all styles. So I think the last clinic we did in Louisiana, I saw someone out there with a powered scooter style wheelchair, which was pretty cool to see. They're just cruising around.
How did the sport first start? What's the history behind its origins?
I can't give you guys a full in-depth history, but much like skateboarding, it started in kind of like Southern California. I think Wills was really the first person to break out. I'm not sure if he was the actual first person to kind of put it out there, but definitely the first person to become like mainstream. And it's really just kind of evolved from there, where you see people from all over the world now participating.
And by Wheels, you're referring to Aaron Fotheringham, who, as many have called kind of the true starter of the sport and the movement. When it comes to the sport itself, like what type of tricks are people doing when they're at the skate park, when they're going down in their chairs? Like what can people expect to see in terms of tricks?
Yeah, that's, I think, the beauty of it, because every skate park's different, right? And every rider is going to have a different skill level or a different way that they view the skate park, right? And going into it, there tends to be limitations, but that's kind of what makes it fun, because people always end up finding a way to adapt or finding a means to using what they have been, like the cards they've been dealt, right? So for most, you might just see simply going up and down ramps. You might see a lot of wheelies, or what we'll call manuals in the skateboarding terminology, where they're balancing on their back wheels. Sometimes going down the stairs, holding, or just straight up launching downstairs, like gapping it from the top to the bottom. With our event, we've brought in different kind of adaptive ramps that'll make more of the park accessible, so that getting up onto a rail or a ledge is more easier for a wheelchair, or more, it makes it possible. And some skate parks already kind of come built in with features that are approachable for a wheelchair, whether it's like kind of like a ride on rail or a feature that allows you to kind of launch up. So it's always just going to be kind of the landscape that you're viewing, right?
How does the competition day look, and how are these competitions judged?
So the judging has become like a evolution of sorts. This past year, we kind of came together and formed this World WCMX Federation to really start to set the standard. We've been doing this event for practically 10 years now. And typical event day, we're getting there early, getting the branding out, getting all the infrastructure, sound equipment, tables, judges settled, riders meetings, getting ramps in place, allowing riders to kind of familiarize and practice, because a lot of people will show up for the first time on event day, and that's going to be their first look at the course and trying to figure out, okay, we want to put a ramp here, or this is what I can do a trick on there, and we're going through the motions to keep it all moving.
I'm curious because you mentioned how some skate parks are already, they have things in place to make it more accessible, more approachable for riders. But do you find yourself having to educate like these different skate parks or venues that you are doing these competitions in? Because I'm sure it's not only the awareness of the sport, but also the needs of accessibility to make WCMX accessible for its riders.
Yeah, absolutely. It's becoming more and more of a topic of discussion with cities that are building skate parks to kind of have this in mind. A lot of riders prefer that the skate park is just how it is, so that they can have their own go at it in the sort. But it is a very nice thing to consider when designing a skate park, right? Like to have this end user in mind, because that's never been the trend. With the actual event venues, I'm in my full-time job. I manage skate parks for a living, and this has become a passion project of sorts. When I first got introduced to WCMX, the organizations that were wanting to put on this event kind of came and went, and I always chose to keep it going because I had the means to with the facilities that I managed. So going into it, I'm already familiar with the skate parks that we're hosting the event at, so the education piece is already there. I'm just thinking, okay, how can I make it more accessible? How can I make it different from last year so that it's a higher level of competition, XYZ? And it's starting to kind of snowball where more organizations are talking about it, more individuals are advocating to see that be considered in final skate park design.
Has there been like really any big strides in the way of accessibility that since you started working with WCMX that you've really taken the pride in, that how far it's grown or expanded since you started?
Yeah. So a couple years ago, when we were going into the postponed 2020 Olympics, the bigger events, Dew Tour, X Games, I don't know what really switched, but there became a lot more interest to incorporate adaptive skateboarding and WCMX into these bigger events. And that was kind of like an awe-inspiring moment, right? Like to be from where I had started doing what I had done. And, there's countless other organizations and individuals who have been doing their thing. But to see it kind of culminate to that moment was really cool to see happen and experience it in person. And from there, this past year in Paris, they did a adaptive skateboarding exhibition at the Paris Olympics, which was just really like a profound thing to experience. Unfortunately, WCMX wasn't included in that, but we're hoping that the LA Games are going to take that next step into that direction of inclusion.
Oh, absolutely. I think that would be a tremendous opportunity, especially given the scene in LA. It just lends itself to the sport. Who are some of the names that folks should be aware of within the sport, within the scene of WCMX?
In WCMX, my first person I'm going to say is Tony Thogmartin. He's out in Upland, California. Good friend of mine. Aaron Wills, obviously everybody knows Aaron Fotheringham. David Labuzer out in Germany has really done some amazing things to kind of pioneer the programming and the level of skill that you see in competition. Lorraine Trong out of Switzerland is the top female competitor in the world. And our defending world champion, Thomas Woods out of the UK, is just an incredible person to watch. just any given day, right? This kid has innovated tricks and done things I never thought possible in a wheelchair in the skate park. And he just keeps finding ways to keep it going. And there's countless other people. I know I'm forgetting a lot of people right now, but those are some of the heavy hitters I would shout out for sure.
Oh, what does like a competition calendar look like for you all throughout the summer or throughout the year?
So it's continued to evolve. At one point, it was literally just the World WCMX Championship that I would host every year. It was primarily in California, and it kind of shifted between a summertime event to a wintertime event. This past year, we did it in Birmingham, Alabama. Or about a month ago now, it was in Birmingham, Alabama. But this past year was the first time that we expanded into a series after we essentially formed the World WCMX Federation. We had all of the individual kind of our organization officers, all of our representatives of our board come together and host their own local events throughout the world. So we had competitions in Switzerland, Germany, the UK, XYZ. Obviously, we had a couple in the US. We had an online event that really kind of expanded the access to the program for a lot of people, right? Because coming to America from the other side of the world isn't always possible. Even from across the country isn't always possible. So it's really cool to see that it's gotten to that point.
And what lessons do you take away from having that series, having these competitions around the world and online as well? Like, what does that do to build the movement going forward?
I mean, the lesson that I learned is starting earlier, start fundraising earlier, because it is, nothing is free, right? Most athletes don't get the support they need. Most, individuals wanting to learn don't have the access that they need. And I think going into 2025, that's really a big priority for me, is kind of focusing on the access to programs for beginners and people wanting to really kind of just hone their skills. And, what we haven't really set any dates yet for competition this year yet. I know it's coming up soon, other than it hasn't been announced yet, but I heard Switzerland's going to push to host the World Championship later this year. But just really trying to find ways to help support athletes who are competing at a high level and provide access to individuals wanting to get into the scene.
Is there a dream event or a dream like skate park you hope to have a WCMX event at sometime in the future?
I honestly think the dream for everyone is to see this become a Paralympic sport, or at the very least start to see steps, like big steps towards that becoming a possibility, because it's always kind of been touch and go with some of these bigger organizations. They say they want to help, they voice that they're going to do this or that, or we're going to do more next year, and it always ends up turning into a photo op. So we're hoping that with the momentum that we've built as our own grassroots thing, because this is now the athletes who are making the final say in things. I was always in a position to host these events, but I never wanted to be the final say, which is why we formed this federation, so that the athletes, individuals competing, could make these decisions. And I think now that we have taken that step, we're becoming more and more likely to see that progress happen in the hopefully nearer future. But if worst case is 20 years from now, we're there, I know that everyone's played their part to get it to that point,
What strikes me is, despite the fact that the federation is relatively new, you have been hosting events for the past decade. There already seems to be such a strong presence internationally. It's not just focused within the US, as most of the athletes you mentioned were outside of the US. How does that help really grow the solid foundation of the sport? Because as we had many conversations on this show, when it comes to grassroots parasport and organizations, that foundation is so key to success. So what does it mean to have that foundation spread across the world with interest across the world?
I think it's, the beauty of like an exponential growth, right? Like compound interest in individuals, because now you have so many more people who are getting introduced to it in so many different places. And I think it really just starts to snowball and hopefully bring newcomers to the sport, new talent, new interest to support. Maybe, I don't know, like it really starts to become something that a corporate sponsor sees as like something worthwhile investing in to support long term and really see it get to that point. Because right now it's like pinching pennies and pulling nickels out of the couch cushions to make it all happen. But we don't do it for the money. We do it because every kid in a wheelchair or with some type of disability deserves to know that the skate park's also a place for them where they can find camaraderie and community and success in their own skill development.
Is there any, because this is the Canadian show, is there any Canadians to look out for in the WCMX scene?
I am personally not familiar off the top of my head. I really hope that we can see some Canadians competing in the near future, because in skateboarding, which I'm an avid skateboarder, there's clearly some top talent coming out of Canada. And I know from the adaptive side, I don't know if they're up north, but on the visually impaired side, there's a lot of great organizations up north. It might be more on the American side of the border, but if the awareness is there, I'm sure there's the interest to get people out and participating.
Absolutely. Victor, for someone who is listening, they want to find out more information. Where can they go to find out more about WCMX and the Federation?
I would suggest checking out Instagram if you got it, at World WCMX is the Instagram handle for all of the programs and events. And we're trying to really use that as kind of like our megaphone to getting information out. worldwcmx.org is the website. Not always up to date. We're a small team. Wearing a lot of hats, and we all have full-time jobs. But try to keep up with that. We're building out a newsletter, and we're really trying to kind of build the ship as we're sailing it, so to speak. So if you reach out, please understand there might be a delay, but we're seeing everything. We're getting to people when we can, and we're doing the best we can to really make this something that is a better, more effective resource for everybody that wants to access it.
Victor, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing a bit of insight into a sport that we didn't know a lot about. And we'd love to connect down the road when the next series of competitions are taking place to see how things are going.
100%. Would love to talk more. Thank you guys so much for having me on.
Nathan, that was really insightful. I didn't quite know what to expect when Victor was coming on and chatting. I was excited. I knew there was going to be a wealth of new information, new insight to a sport in a world that I did not have any knowledge of. That was fantastic. But I really found it fascinating that a lot of the key through lines and kind of the growing pains, so to speak, that he was talking about is something that is very relatable for any grassroots parasport organization.
Yeah, like with Victor Nelson, and that conversation was absolutely fantastic. Just hearing, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of growing pains, but I feel like with Wheelchair Motocross, they're really taking great steps, and they have a great foundational core where they have races and competitions already happening all around the world, and they're getting that international base. They've had experience with riders and competitors doing Nitro Circus, doing other events. So it's really, really fantastic hearing that they have this great foundational base, and it's just continuing to grow and expand. And I have a feeling, and I know you probably agree with me, that this is going to be one of those sports 10, 15 years down the line that will hopefully be in the games and hopefully be at the top and center stage as it should be, because it has the core pieces. It sounds like, just speaking to Victor, has great people in there who are really going to help it grow and expand to its full potential.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, as he mentioned, the WCMX World Federation is relatively new. It's only a year or two old, but they already have had 10 years worth of competitions. They already have that international presence and awareness and buy-in from athletes around the world. He mentioned when I asked him about the top athletes, he mentioned one American, and then the rest were from the UK, Germany, Switzerland. Like, that just already shows the depth of the competition pool. And those are the types of things, especially when he mentioned his goal about wanting to get to the Paralympics. Those are the types of things that they look at when they're trying to determine sports in for consideration for the Paralympic Games or these major international competitions. How competitive, how strong is this sport internationally? And I think they have a great start and foundation there already.
100%. And one thing I'd love to ask you is, he mentioned when creating the federation, he wanted to give the athletes voices as well. How important is that sort of grassroots in sport?
Oh, absolutely. It is a very key to make sure you're getting the athlete perspective, especially when you're growing from the grassroots, when you're growing from the ground up, because they're the ones who are going to really fuel that growth and sustainability early on. He talked about wanting to get a big, sponsorship and support that, and how that could really kind of help build that movement. But you need those athletes there who are keen to show up for those early competitions when there isn't a big prize for coming away a winner. It's just people who are passionate, who want to come and build a community around a shared interest of this sport. That's what really is key for those early years, and I would say they are in those early years. But I also see this is going to be a rapidly growing sport. You already have some of this kind of support or interest or awareness from things like the X Games and ones that you mentioned, that there is an appetite for it. There is a willingness to see and explore new extreme sports, because we don't have a lot of those on the major international stage. So there's an appetite to grow something here. You just like to see in the next 2 years. I don't know if they're going to be able to make the Paralympics in LA. I think that the timeline is just a bit too short, but I would love to see it. I would really be excited if they had, whether it's a test event or whether it's just a demo that they're putting on in and around that competition to build that awareness even more. I think that would be a huge step forward for them.
Oh, 100%. It's one of those things where LA is probably too close to the date, but even with LA, I did want to mention, so the transition video between Paris and LA at the Paris Paralympic Games, they did have a lot of wheelchair motocross in the background for it as well. So it is something that hopefully will be a test event, hopefully have some sort of partnership, whether it's on the Olympic side or Paralympic side, that's going to be running while LA hosts the events, hosts the games. But in the long run, this is definitely a sport that you could see probably in a Paralympics, as it has that kind of international background as we talked about, but also there's that keen side of it too, because there's so many towns, so many communities that have skateboard parks. And just with that too, it is something that is accessible for people with wheelchairs, and even the work that Victor's doing, but a lot of these riders and competitors are doing, is they're laying the foundation to make a lot more parks accessible, which is going to allow for more kids to get involved, which is going to allow for more people to get involved, because there's that adrenaline aspect. There's that fun side of it too, where you're doing these tricks, where you're pushing yourself to your limits. And that is thrilling for athletes, and that is thrilling for people. And it's just a great way to have fun, because I'm very fortunate. I wasn't a skateboarder myself, but I grew up right beside a skate park, and I got to know a lot of skateboarders. And it's a very inclusive, welcoming community of people who are at those sorts of parks. So it's just a welcoming environment, and it's that perfect storm, I feel, that is going to really allow people to get more involved and really grow and just see something so special with that sense of community that can come from the parks that are in different cities and in different places.
I 100% agree. I also found it very interesting. He had a little nugget there that some athletes apparently don't want on the adaptive kind of tools and supports and ramps and things at the park. They just want to try to do what they can with the terrain, with the park itself as it normally is. I found that very interesting, but not all that surprising. Were you surprised when you heard that?
I feel like I wasn't too surprised. It's one of those things where, like, for a lot of athletes and even myself, it's, I need accommodations just because of my condition, but I don't need things to be like shoved in my face of I need this, I need that, where we can still do a lot of the things that anyone else can. So there's that fine balance of it where some accommodations are necessary, some adjustments are necessary dependent on disability. But at the end of the day, if we're overloading with so much stuff, then it becomes a bit of a problem, and it more affects the sport than anything else, because the big thing with parasport, and how I at least see it, is it's just a different discipline of sport. That's all it is. It's just a unique way. There's adaptations that are needed, but so is different like versions of skiing, or so is mountain biking versus road cycling. And there's just little disciplines and little changes that are needed. So it's important to really figure out and really lay that foundation of there's some accessibility needs that are going to help more up and coming athletes maybe, or help people get inside the sport, but you don't need a huge overhaul in a lot of different aspects.
Yeah, well, and we talked a lot about the key in the support and in partnerships and the impact that can have. That leads perfectly into the PSN update. Nathan, take it away.
Now, the PSN update.
The Blind Hockey League's Carnegie Cup had all the makings of an instant classic. The 3-game series saw the Aces and Mercuries face off at TD Place Arena in Ottawa. Game 1 opened up with the Mercuries taking the 4-3 win before the Aces responded with an 8-6 barn-burning W. Tied 1-1 heading into Game 3, the Mercuries took the crown in overtime with Vancouver's Anthony Kalia scoring the championship crowning goal. The 2024 edition of the Cup partnered with Hockey Canada at the 2025 World Juniors, and that's the Parasport update.
Yeah, again, another great competition, one supported by key foundations, key organization, NSOs that are coming together to support the adaptive side of the game. You love to see it, Nathan, don't you?
It is such a beautiful harmony and just partnerships that are being created here, especially with Blind Hockey and Hockey Canada in this way. And there's some great videos, great content coming out with World Juniors players on the Canadian squad trying to balance blind hockey pucks on their stick. And let's just say Jason Yuha and a lot of the other blind hockey players were definitely able to handle the size and weight of the pucks compared to the World Juniors guys. But it's just great seeing these kind of events happen, and just having that kind of puck and that kind of hockey that we had for the Carnegie Cup is fantastic. When you have back and forth games, championships being decided in overtime, really shows and helps that parasport movement move forward and that blind hockey movement move forward. And just the fact that TSN Plus was having some of these games streamed is huge, and just more and more stuff's going to come, and it's really going to help bring in different audiences, different athletes in Canada, but also around the world too. So the cream of the crop are going to rise, and there's just going to be more opportunities for Carnegie Cups, but also other tournaments going forward, which is really, really exciting.
Absolutely. Talk about a great start to 2025, but that's all the time we have for today's show. We'll catch you next time. This is PSN.
Thanks for tuning in to Parasport Nation. Like and subscribe to the channel to follow us now.